Welcome back to the afternoon's program here, 4BC Brisbane, 4RO in Rockhampton. If you'd like a question answered by an actual expert in an Atwood Marshall Lawyers Estate Litigation Senior Associate by way of Duncan MacDougall, please email us now, afternoons@4bc.com.au, or you can text through 0499 880 882. Stay with us on this one, okay? It might seem a little strange, but Michael Jackson is back in the headlines. He's got a new biopic. It's been released last week, and it has renewed interest in his legacy. But it's not just the movie that's attracting attention. Now, we know Michael Jackson died in 2009, but yet nearly 2 decades later, disputes over his estate are still making news. The reports say that his daughter, Paris Jackson, is raising concerns about how the estate has been managed, including fees, investments and payouts. And now I guess most of us will never really understand what that multi-billion-dollar music catalogue and all of those things in their estate might, be like. But the legal questions are surprisingly familiar. What rights do beneficiaries have if they think an executor or trustee is getting it wrong? Joining us now to break it down is Atwood Marshall Lawyers Estate Litigation Senior Associate Duncan MacDougall. Good afternoon to you, Duncan.
Good afternoon.
Very quickly, have you seen the new Michael Jackson biopic?
No, but it's on the list.
Okay, yeah. Right. And it is amazing to think that someone who was a very public figure, who had the estate all sorted, there are still 2 decades on, there's still issues with the family as to how that's all being divvied up and shared.
And I mean, it's one of the biggest estates in the world. And it's funny how you look at the issues that they're having, and it's the same issues that everyday Queenslanders are having with estates here. We run into the same issues, Are things being managed properly? Are people being transparent with how things are moving along? Just with those larger estates, there's a little more scrutiny that comes along with it. And I think that's now the issue with his estate, where certain beneficiaries, i.e. I think it's his daughter Paris, who's now questioning certain things on how things are being controlled.
Well, she's certainly the one opponent to this film, and the film has largely been, yes, about his legacy, and there'll be fans who love it, but the questions over the integrity of what's being portrayed, but mostly that the film, I guess, is being put out there by the estate to push a certain narrative, but also to cash in.
Yeah.
Because it keeps generating income for the family.
It's funny how somebody passes away and this estate is just earning millions every year as one of the largest estates, post-humanist estates down the track here, who's actually earned so much money, millions of dollars, and it just continuing to generate income. So there's obviously going to be some scrutiny on how those trustees are dealing with the estate.
Well, there's many pockets, I feel, as well, that need to be lined. Where does it sit in comparison, question without notice, to Elvis's legacy and Elvis's estate?
I'm not too familiar with how Elvis's estate was dealt with.
Well, no, I'm just thinking of public figures and, the fact that their legacy continues through estates and through the earning capacity, of he's a brand, right?
He is,
so the family cashes in on
all these royalties, etc. I think with Michael's estate, it's his will specifically directed it all to flow into this family trust structure,
right?
Whereby there's these trustees, one being a music executive, one being a lawyer, who's basically managing as trustees who gets what, how things are being invested, how fees are applied. And then you've got your group of beneficiaries being his, I believe it's 3 kids and a mother. And I think there's some charities involved there as well. So that scrutiny there that these beneficiaries are now applying to this, it's obviously going to continue to be looked at because it's just going to continue generating an income every year due to this film, due to other music things and royalties moving forward.
And we go from one extreme to the other end of the spectrum being, this is happening to everyday Aussies. This can happen for families. It's a family trust is something that I've only just recently sort of been made aware of. How do they actually work? And then how much freedom do you have as a trustee? I didn't know that such thing exists. Obviously, I knew such thing existed, but I just don't know how they operate.
Yeah, so it's a legal structure whereby you've got, and it's separate to your estate, remember. You've got your estate dealing with your personal assets in your own personal name. A trust is a separate entity where you've got a trustee who's going to be, or trustees, plural, managing assets within this trust to the benefit of these list of eligible beneficiaries who are under that trust. Now, that trustee has a number of different obligations and fiduciary duties whilst administrating that trust, including acting in good faith, for proper purpose, acting in the best interest of the beneficiaries, how things are going to be invested, how and when to distribute money to certain individuals, that sort of thing. So depending on what the trust deed says, is the biggest thing in all of it. And really how that's going to tie into your estate plan, particularly whilst going through the estate planning process. Because a lot of people get advice from certain individuals, set up these very complicated trust structures, and not actually take into consideration, well, if I pass away, how's this going to marry into what I want under my will? Is there any sort of passing of control of these trusts we have to be aware of, and make sure everything ties in with one another?
Because you're saying an executor is different to a trustee.
An executor is a trustee in a sense.
Right.
An executor is a trustee of the estate.
Of the estate.
Yeah. Whereas a trustee of, for example, a discretionary family trust operates very similar, where they are in control of these assets, not to their benefit in particular,
right, that's
but
say,
for the benefit of others.
Can you appoint, because an executor of an estate can be a family member or whatever else, to distribute the wishes of the person who's deceased. But does it have to be like a financial specialist or
not necessarily? It can be family members as well. It could be spouses in that instance.
So you could choose anyone to be a trustee.
Yeah, but it's all determining, I suppose, who do you want in that role, in that decision-making capability.
Do you trust them?
Exactly. There's other roles in a trust, for example, an appointor who has the ability to add or remove a trustee. So that's really your controlling position there. Now, the trust deed itself will generally have a clause in it that says, well, I can appoint somebody as a successor via my will to take control of this trust, appoint a new trustee if I were to pass away. But again, old deeds out there, it's important during the course of the estate planning is to review those deeds, make sure it's across that. Otherwise, there may be some new deeds that have to be entered into.
Right, and then it's up to date. This might be a silly question. Is a trustee, is it a paid position?
Well, when you're talking about estates in particular, when you're managing an estate, a lot of the times people get into these roles and think, well, it's a bigger job than I was anticipating. Yeah. I know the deceased may have not even told them that they're going to take on the job. Sure. All of a sudden, the lawyer reaches out, or for example, maybe family member says, well, we got a will, you're the executor now. Generally, an executor will be entitled to any out-of-pocket expenses whilst administrating an estate. But there also, if there's a very complicated estate, there is also the ability, if the will allows it, and an agreement with the beneficiaries, what's called an executor's commission, which deals more along the lines of the pains and troubles of administrating an estate. But again, that can always be in dispute and generally it's more those real complicated estates where you've got beneficiaries across multiple jurisdictions. A very sizable estate. There's a very complicated trust structures incorporating part of it as well, and that commission is generally based on a certain percentage of the gross value of the estate.
Oh my goodness, it sounds complex, but I know you're breaking it down very well. If you've got a question that you would like to ask Duncan here from Atwood Marshall Lawyers. He is an estate litigation senior associate. If you've got a question that we've been talking about in regards to estates or family trust is what we're speaking about today, 133 882 is a 4BC open line. Thanks to Watch Smoke Alarms. Of course, you can text as well, 0499 880 882. With a family trust, the trust lasts forever, or does it come with an expiration date?
Yeah, there will be a what's called a vesting date in that trust, and generally in Australia that's 80 years. So although it's meant to generate income for as long as we can, there will be an end point to it. So generally speaking, with those trusts, it'll be that 80-year mark, in which case then the trustees will have to take steps to wind the trust up and distribute to the beneficiaries.
Okay.
But during the course of whilst the trust is still operating, that's when the trustees still have that discretionary ability to make distributions whilst the trust is continuing.
Particularly if it's generating income.
Absolutely.
Or whatever. Right, okay.
Yeah.
Matt has texted through 0499 880 882. Matt says, can family trust funds from a family go to kids as trustees and then the parents live off those funds rather than income?
I think it comes down to what the trustee says, making sure you're across who's going to be in that controlling positions, who's going to actually be the list of eligible beneficiaries there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some people get sticklers in terms of what's the definition of children, particularly if it's going to be going down a list of eligible people,
Right.
whether stepkids are incorporated as part of that.
Sure.
Just to make sure it's very clear as to who's going to be benefiting. It could very well be that if something were to happen to each spouse, you've got some children there who are of age. We've got to make sure they're over the age of 18 to be appointed under that role, who can take control of that trust and start operating it again.
And I guess, is it not trendier, but are you finding that more people are leaning towards setting up a family trust because there are other benefits like tax loopholes?
Yeah,
or whatever?
yeah. There's a lot of tax benefits with them. There's a lot of asset protection. It can be used. It can be used to a benefit of avoiding claims against the estate as well.
Right.
Whereas a claim made against the estate is only dealing with estate assets. Yeah, in the estate. Whereas if it's held in a family trust, it's not necessarily part of the estate. So it's a non-estate asset, not eligible for this claim against the estate. But that being said, it's not just, okay, let's set up a family trust. It's going to be in consultation with your lawyer, and particularly your accountant or financial advisor.
Sure.
Just making sure that they're across, okay, what's going in, what's going out, what are the tax consequences going to be, what's the overall appetite for risk, things like that.
Okay. 133882, the 4BC open line, thanks to Watch Smoke Alarms. Julie from Clayfield has called through. Hello, Julie.
Hello.
Hi, you've got a question for Duncan.
Yes, I'm just curious about superannuation and home within a will. Even if you've got trusts, what is the best place to put those items?
In relation to your superannuation, particularly?
Yeah.
Yeah. So superannuation, like a trust, it's going to be considered a non-estate asset. So what we want to make sure with your superannuation is that you've got what's called a binding death benefit nomination, binding the trustee of your super fund, whether that be if you're operating a self-managed fund, binding the trustee of who's ever managing that. Generally, that could be a corporate trustee, or for example, any industry fund, Australian Retirement Trust, Q Super, Sun Super, things like that. But we want to make sure that you've got specified beneficiaries listed there so that you have a determination as to who's going to get your super. Otherwise, there's the risks of claims, and that'll generally be from any sort of dependents. So spouses, children, things like that. So generally, if you've got a very linear family structure, I generally recommend a distribution to your spouse, because your spouse will receive that tax-free, because they'll still be considered a tax dependent as well. Similarly with children under the age of 18.
Interesting.
And a home, how can that be considered in a will?
Your home, is it? Yeah, so your home there, depending on the nature of how it's owned and how you're listed on title, whether it's be joint tenants or tenants in common. Again, that sounds like a conversation you need to have with an estate planning lawyer who's be able to advise, I suppose, the nature of that and how it's going to be incorporated in your overall estate plan and under your will.
I hope that's answered your question, Julie. Thank you so much for your call. Peter's texted in very quickly. Can you exclude one of your children from benefiting from your estate?
You can choose. It's your will. You can do what you want. But that being said, there's always going to be that risk of a claim that there's an avenue there where if they're eligible as a child, they can make a claim, but they have to show need for further provision. And it depends on the nature and size of your estate. So if you've got a very small estate, it might not even be worth their time and money to pursue. Whereas if you've got a sizable estate there's still that risk there, and in which, again, get that advice from a solicitor who can mitigate that risk.
We love when you come in and impart your knowledge on us. Duncan MacDougall there, Atwood Marshall Lawyers, Estate Litigation Senior Associate. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
See you next Wednesday. Thanks.